Da 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 da. Good cheer. Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never met me before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. Today, I think it was equal in exploring the inside and the outside. I was a little bit in my own space today. We were talking yesterday a little bit about taking care of ourselves, recognizing that, we don't have all the answers. And it's important to make sure that we understand that we are the most important thing in the world, each and every one of us. If you're anything like me, if you are a highly sensitive, if you're empathic, if you are codependent, right? You know, quite often what we do is we neglect ourselves and we move forward in taking care of others' needs. I am very guilty of that in many, many ways. The first thing that comes to my mind is my only claim to fame in my working career is that I have never missed a day of work. I am 64 years old. I have been working since I was 12 years old. Hopefully, I'll be retired. But in saying that, I have to say, I have always made sure that I was at work. That's not to say that I haven't been late. And I'm going to be honest in that because I am naturally a bit of a procrastinator. I believe I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. But in that fastness and that being very accountable, not necessarily accountable to myself, but accountable to others. And if you don't get what I'm saying, it's that idea. It just seemed like such a less hassle to phone a manager, phone an owner, and go, I've got a cold. I did not like lying, number one. And because I always tried to shoot for those supervisory and management positions myself, only because it just meant less people breathing on the back of my neck, that I knew how it felt when people called in and said they couldn't come into work, that they weren't responsible about their shifts. There is nothing that would have driven me more crazier than somebody with a job for a free paycheck. That would irk me. That would put me in a bad mood for sure. But in appreciating that, I didn't want the hassle for myself. I didn't want people to feel about me how I felt about others who did it because I understood how it felt. And because I was somebody who didn't like to get cranked at, right? Didn't like to get in trouble. Had a hard time saying no because if you're calling in sick and they're short staffed, they're going to do their very best to talk you in to coming in for your shift. And I would cave in instantly. So it wasn't like I had a good work ethic out of my own accountability, being that person. It was just less of a hassle, right? And so it's really important that we are able to stand up for ourselves, to say no, right? We just can't or How come I've got to do this every single time when everybody's supposed to know this position, supposed to be doing this position, and yet it always lands in my lap? Well, that's normally because we don't know how to say no. We put our needs off to the side. And that is only one example, right? People we care about, we see that they're suffering because we are highly sensitive, because we are empathic. We tend to have a lot of guilty emotions. It's the way we were programmed, it was the way we were brought up. It was by intent that we were meant to feel that way. And even if we didn't know it, that's just the way it is. It's not just because we're sensitive. We are brought up to learn not to ask, to learn not to say no, right? And so we have to learn to take care of ourselves. It's difficult. I know it. I right because I am that person myself. And guilt and shame has always been my steering wheel. And my family, my friends, my coworkers, my employers, they caught on to that instantly. And I was easily movable, right? They could adjust me into whatever position, whatever they needed me to do in just a few sentences. And I would be that person to break down and say yes. And so lots of times we recognize, somebody's not feeling well. Somebody's worked hard all week and they don't have the energy, and you haven't put any energy into too much. And you feel guilty for that. You're feeling guilty for your good health. And we're going to talk about health today and how it affects us emotionally, right? But in that conversation I want to have tonight, I just want to kind of stress that we are the priority. We should be taking care of ourselves. I try, right, in my own way. I know it's in sabotaging, but I have problems saying no to myself when it comes to treats, when it comes to my favorite foods, when it comes to the amounts, right? And even though I'm not 311 pounds anymore, it's still a problem for me. It is one of my weaknesses. And, it's something that I've always struggled with. And not only do I struggle with this, all of my sisters struggle with their weight in varying degrees and in different ways. If you've been with me for any length of time, you would have known that as an adult, I became a very obese woman, right? I always felt that I was obese. I was always meant to feel that I was super big, right? I don't like that word fat, right? So, super big in the 60s and 70s, it wasn't like it was with the kids in this day and age, like where everybody is overweight. There might have been in any school that I was ever in, maybe one or two kids that were overweight. But that's how I coped in my upbringing, in the experience that I was having at home. And it's really as you would choose something that would make you feel even worse, because who wants to get it at school and get it at home? I don't think too many people. I don't know how I got it into my head, right? That I was supposed to be coping with my issues by making sure that I had treats, that I had cakes and cookies and pop and chocolate bars all the time. I went to work at 12 years old because my parents always had me on diet off and on, off and on. Sometimes it was because there just was no money to keep me on a diet because diets can be expensive, right? Eating meat is very expensive. Diet food is very expensive, right? And also, food in my household was part of the reward and punishment. And so I think a lot of it was out of, what do you call it? When you go against the grain, when you push back, you're right. You're being rebellious. That's the word I was looking for. Rebellious. Hello, Tammy. Being rebellious. I went to work very early. I was babysitting. Oh my goodness. 10 years old. I was babysitting full time pretty much, 5 days a week, anything to get out of my household. And I was making good money. You know, in those days, it was like 50 cents an hour or dollar an hour. But when you're going to somebody's house on Friday evening and then not coming back until Sunday afternoon, I would easily make $100 every single week. And for a 10-year-old in the 60s and 70s, that was a lot of money. That was a lot of money. And what did I have to show for it? Not too much because I spent it on chocolate bars and potato chips and pop and comic books and going to movies, right? Didn't spend it too much on clothes because, well, clothes were expensive. I had, right, other things to pay for, like junk food. And because we were a low income family, my mother went shopping in secondhand stores. And being the oldest girl, I would get the first outfit, and then the clothes would just be passed down to my sisters as they fit into them, which they normally didn't. I think they did in all actuality because it was my perception that I was a fat kid, right? I knew I was eating junk, but I was super active and I burned a lot of calories. And when I look at my pictures now as a child and compare them to when I hit my 20s when the weight really came on to me, I wasn't obese. Oh, I look at that child and I go, that child is not fat in any way. But I was made to feel that way. And because we were low income, maybe because I didn't take care of myself in a hygienic way or in wearing fancy clothes, I just wore what fit, that I didn't have any sense of style and didn't even consider style in any way until I hit maybe 16 years old. And when I started getting interested in boys, and then more of my money went towards outfits and stuff. That was a coping mechanism. By the time I left high school, I was probably about 175 pounds. Lots of people, even myself, I wish I was 175 pounds, right? In this moment. But 175 pounds and considered myself obese. And I was constantly put on diets and taken off diets and the no for second helpings. And it became a mental thing for me. Once I left school, I ballooned pretty fast. I packed on 100 pounds. It probably only took me a couple of years once I left high school. Obesity does run in my family. My grandmother was over 500 pounds. I had two, that was on my dad's side. On my mother's side, I had two uncles who were well over 600 pounds, right? And so obesity ran on both sides of the family. I could say that there was a concern about possibly that I would get that big also, but that concern wasn't put on my sisters in any way, except as using me as an example. Do you want to get all fat and stuff like your sister? Then you got to watch what you eat, right? So I was used quite often as an example to my sisters, and I'm taking credit for a lot of those eating issues that they have, because I was used as that example. And, I don't know if it was a real stress uh, for my mom and dad. I think it was sometimes, I have no idea, to tell you the truth. It was pretty screwed up. I grew up in a dynamic family, and I could say that they were worried that I was going to be obese too, but not being an obese kid, that concern was still there, which was kind of odd that there was no normalcy in that. And it gave me such a kink set of mind that I went to work at 10 years old and was working pretty much full time by the time I was 12. In fact, I was paying rent at home, $100 a month every month at 12 years old, right? It's kind of I grew up in a dynamic family. We all grow up with idiosyncrasies in our family. But some families really have a big load full, and like I said, I'm not the only one in my family who has issues with their weight. My sister Tracy is a very skinny lady now, but she's been very, very sick for the past few years. But my sister was well into her 200 pounds, maybe 250, 260 pounds. Other sister who is on diets and off diets, on diets and off diets all the time. I have another sister who has a little time frame where she's allowed to eat whatever she wants as much as she wants, and she has to get it done within a couple of hours. Like really bad eating habits. And we were kids because we came from a low income home. We ate a lot of rice. We ate a lot of Kraft dinner. When I say a lot, it was a lot. Sometimes we would eat rice every single day for a month. And that's the truth. And then, of course, having that mentality as a kid, that I was super self-conscious, and I felt like I was being punished all the time by being on and off these diets all the time, that I felt like I was punished, that I got that idea that it was hard for me to say no to myself. So I would say yes to the chocolate bars and yes to the bags of chips, and I would squirrel it away. I would squirrel it away. And I really had kinky. I say kinky, I mean really, really messed up. I was super messed up emotionally and mentally, not just because of my weight, but becoming coming from a dynamic family. And if you've been hanging out with me for any length of time, you understand when I say dynamic families, that means there was a lot of messed up going on there. There were lots of different archetypes. And, growing up, the scapegoat and not recognizing that I was a scapegoat. I just thought there was something wrong with me. I thought, I didn't matter. I felt like I knew my father loved me. I knew my sisters cared for me, but I really thought my mother hated me. She was a very unaffectionate woman. She didn't like to be touched, didn't like to have her pictures taken. She wasn't affectionate in any way, no kisses, no I love yous, no sweetness about my mother in any way. Again, epigenetically, these things come down the line, and she was treated the same way by her father. And because my father was the extreme opposite, my father was a very affectionate, kind, sweet man who loved his children and had no problem showing that. It really irked my mother. Me and my father had I think we had a special relationship. It could have just been on my part being a codependent because he was my savior, he was my bodyguard, he was the person who protected me, he was the person who loved on me and cared for me and spent time with me and took me out on adventures, right, that had time for me. And but maybe that was in my own mentality, right? I put myself in those shoes so many times. I thought I was maybe not my father's favorite, but I was the oldest and the only one who was interested in spending time with them because my sisters were already off doing their own thing and they didn't really, besides, well, they didn't have those issues until their adulthood, right? When it came to the eating and the overweightness and dieting and stuff, they didn't have those issues until they became adults. And so I do take accountability for a big part of that because I was used as the example for my sisters and it messed them up. I think it scared them, right? Because they saw what it did to me in my adulthood. By the time I was say 22, 23 years old, I was hitting 300 pounds. I was big. And of course, all my friends had boyfriends and I was interested in boys. I wanted to wear nice clothes. I always had good jobs and lots of money and right in those days it was hard to find nice clothes in plus sizes, right? And because I had never truly been taught how to take care of myself, I took care of myself the best that I could. And it wasn't enough. It was clearly recognizable in the way that I was treated at home. And because I was so insecure about that, kids at school recognized that right off the bat, right? It was like there's a target. There's somebody's going to take it. And having the lessons that I did at home and my dad practicing mindset, we all lived on his inspirational quotes. He had his own set of rules and he never yelled at us or threatened us or punished us. But when he was biting his tongue, you knew that he was upset and you would do whatever you could to make dad happy, right? So I was truly uh, by the time I hit my 20s, I was the person everybody came to with their issues. I had amazing friends. I had people that cared for me. I had a lot of friends, but when it came to relationships, no, I didn't have boyfriends growing up. Yes, I had crushes. Yes, I had friends that I really liked, but nothing would ever come of it because there wasn't that mutual attraction. And because I had been so crushed in my life, like desperately just crushed in my life. I had no way as to how to approach being somebody's girlfriend, right? Because I was my mother's daughter, and because she was not affectionate in any way, of course, I take that on as a lesson. But remember, my dad was the extreme, so I did have that sense of what love really felt like and how he treated my mother, right? And she didn't like that relationship that I had with my father. And it was shown and expressed to me every day. And like I said, by the time I was, oh, I'd say by the time I was 20, I was a mess. I really, I really was a mess. I had a doctor. Here we go about talking about health. I had a doctor, and he was absolutely amazing. Dr. Rahman, right? And he was a gentleman, an East Indian gentleman, and he had his own doctor office. And I needed a family doctor. I was always on diets, always trying to lose weight, off and on, go on a diet for a couple of weeks and then you'd be right off of it. And I'd lose weight fast, 20 pounds in a week. And it was right. And I go, oh my goodness, I need bread. Right. And it was funny because, I had that part of myself that I was beating up. I had part of myself that I felt that I didn't matter, that I was unattractive, and, nobody would approach me except in that friendship way. Um, and my relationship with my mother was still strained, right? And I was trying to create the best life for myself as I possibly could. It was a promise I made to myself when I was a little kid, right? And but creating the best life for myself as I possibly could was not saying I couldn't say no to the donuts and to the potato chips and to all that junk food that I ate. And because I was so messed up, I was so broken and sad, that was my coping mechanisms. Remember what I say all the time. We are all handicapped emotionally, physically, or mentally, or a combination of it all. That was my brokenness. That was my coping mechanism, was food. 27 years old, right? My marriage was, oh, sorry, I wasn't even married yet. We're not going to even get to that point because that's the whole idea and the example for people about positivity. I was so sad. I was so broken, but I was still dependable. I was still at work every single day. I was doing everybody's job. People were calling in sick, and I would take on their positions too, get home totally bagged, no energy because I was 300 pounds, right? And all I wanted to do was hide in my apartment and watch movies or TV food, right? My doctor recognized this in me, right? And he was a great doctor. He wasn't big on prescribing pills. In those days there were no real diet pills or anything like that anyway, but he recognized that I had issues, right? My health, besides being overweight, was pretty good, but because of my family history of heart disease and arthritis and diabetes, he was concerned that these things would infiltrate my life eventually. I was 27 years old, and my doctor, who always said when something was wrong, he'd always say, "Oh, Cindy, just go for a walk." Right? Cindy, meditate, he would say to me. And I'm just like, my dad meditated twice a day, 20 minutes twice a day, his entire life. For me, I'm not a meditator. I am a contemplator, right? I have time in the quiet and I like to do things and let ideas and thoughts come to me. And that is my version of meditating, right? And the same idea when I go for walks and bike rides, right? When I go camping and walk the trails, it's contemplation, right? But lots of people say it's not a meditation unless you're sitting still in the quiet and doing your ohms, right? But that wasn't for me. I was too hyper vigilant, number one, to be able to quiet my system, right? I'd be listening to the drip of the the tap in the sink, or I'd be like listening to people breaking in or walking upstairs or what's going on outside, or right, that I'm just too easily distracted by these things. So meditation would have been a no go for me, and headphones. But no, you can't do that. When you have hypervigilance, it's important to hear what's going on. That's the whole point. You're listening for the murderers and the rapers, right? That this is what hypervigilance does to you. It just puts you on high alert all the time. So meditation was out of the question for me. But walks I can do, right? And walks is what I did. But I went in to see Dr. Rahman one day. And because this went against his grain, because he didn't believe in medicine, he believed that we had the power of the mind to be able to overcome ourselves. He really did. He didn't like to write prescriptions for me ever if he possibly could. But he knew somebody who was a gastronomist, or I can't say the word, but he worked in stomachs and stuff, right? And digestion. But he was also a surgeon and he was practicing the gastric bypass, which is the stomach stapling. My doctor thought, right? Comes up to me when I went to see him and he says, Cindy, would you like to try a procedure called a gastric bypass? Right? I know a doctor who does this operation. I can put a referral in for you, no guarantees that he'll see you, but would you like to see somebody? And, for me, I would jump on anything. I never even heard of a gastric bypass, stomach stapling, right? I had no idea, but he's saying that I could lose a lot of weight. It would be almost guaranteed that I would lose a lot of weight if I had this operation. And I had never had an operation before, but I was on it immediately. I said, please, right? He got me my referral, and about 6 months later, he came back to me and he said, Cindy, I got your referral to go see this surgeon. I was so excited. I was so excited, right? By that time, I was 311 pounds. I went to see this specialist, and he was concerned about my emotional and mental well-being because, of course, he wants me to lose 50 pounds to prove that I would be with his instructions when it came to this surgery. And I said, okay, I'll lose the 50 pounds. And he says, okay, you come back and see me in 3 months. And as soon as he said 3 months, I thought I was going to have the surgery right away. I burst into tears, right? Oh my goodness. Because to me, that was a lifeline. And I didn't have a lot of lifelines in my life. That's how broken I was, right? Seriously broken. And He says, Cindy, come back and see me in 3 months. If you can lose that 50 pounds in 3 months, right? We'll do this operation for you. I followed suit. I lost that 50 pounds. I got back to see him and he says, okay, Cindy, we'll do the operation. We're going to put you on a waiting list. Now I had to wait on a waiting list for this operation. But at the time, they were trying to stop the operations from being allowed, right? Because it was dangerous because you get something called malabsorption where you're not able to absorb vitamins because they have to cut off they have to staple along an area that kind of cuts off an important sugar, right? That helps to process sugar in your body called the duodenum. I don't want to go into medical terms or anything like this, but I just want to tell the story well, just so you can see how important it was, how desperate I was, how sad I was, and how it miraculously um, gave me a life, right? So he put me on a waiting list. So I went to the receptionist and I asked the receptionist, I says, if you have a cancellation for this operation, right? Um, can I get a phone call? She says, oh, sure, we'll put you on a cancellation list, right? And which she did. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call, right? And I got my operation. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks. I had never gone through such excruciating pain in my entire life. I didn't know what the operation entailed in any way. Like, and because I had been put on a waiting list and I'd gotten the operation so quickly, I didn't get an opportunity to go see a therapist or a psychologist, which is part of the prerequisite of having this operation, because they want to make sure that you are emotionally and mentally well enough to have the operation, right? And so when I was in the hospital room the night before the operation, the psychologist came to see me and he did the exam in that spot. And of course, I am not losing any chance on having this operation. So there was no way I was going to fail that pages of questions that he had for me. I was on it, right? And I gave every positive answer that I possibly could come up with. I was not emotionally ready for that operation. I really wasn't, you know. I had that operation and it was terrible, right? I'm grateful I had friends who came and brushed my hair every day and came to visit me, but I was on morphine for the first week, and I'm not somebody who likes painkillers or likes drugs or anything like that. And then I was supposed to be on it for another week. I said, that's it. I'm done. I'm just going to bear it. And I bared the worst pain in my entire life. My whole back just felt like somebody was tearing into it. But I got that. I had that operation. When I got home, I couldn't eat very much. They make your stomach very, very small. I couldn't eat very much. And but I managed to get the fluids. I was drinking milkshakes and I was making homemade milkshakes at home with just milk and ice and vanilla, right? But I could only do fluids. I couldn't manage food, any solid food for like 2 months after that. After 2 months, I hadn't even lost a pound yet. And I had had the operation 2 months previous and still had not lost any weight because I was drinking these milkshake things all the time. And after that, after I saw I wasn't losing weight, I became very strict with myself, like super strict with myself, where I started walking every single day, like long distances, like I do now, like 6, 7, 8 miles every single day to work on another part of the city and home. And my eating was just meat, which was hamburger, tuna, and eggs. That's what I ate. In 9 months, I lost 160 pounds. To tell you the truth, I was more devastated because I had this whole idea of beautiful clothes and boyfriends and my life turning around. But after you lose, you become a sack of skin, literally. Like my boobs were down to the ankles, my stomach was down to my knees, and I couldn't take it. It was just awful. It made me even in a worse state mentally. And right, it was just I looked better overweight than I did then. And that's the truth. And it made me even more messed up in my mentality. So I went to see a plastic surgeon. And again, that plastic surgeon says to me, I need you to maintain this weight for 1 year before I will give you this operation. I think I'd only maintain the weight. Like as soon as I was done dieting, as soon as the doctor says, okay, Cindy, you're done dieting anymore, you're just going to be too skinny. And then I just went straight to the plastic surgeon, and he says, I need you to maintain for a year. Oh my goodness. That was the worst moment like ever, right? Because I had my future all tied up, my plans and what I wanted to do. And of course, I could look good, right? With dressing up and tucking things in and wearing a good bra, but there was no way that I could go further in right introducing myself to right, because by that time guys were kind of chasing me, right? But I couldn't bear the way that I looked, right? And I couldn't get myself past that point. I remembered what I did with the gastric bypass in asking the receptionist if I could go on a waiting list. I says, "Oh, I'm going to try this." I sat in his office for over an hour. He says, "Oh, I'll leave you alone," right? Because I couldn't get a control of myself because I was so devastated. I was just bawling my eyes out, right? After about an hour, I left his office and I went straight to this and I said, can I get on a cancellation list? If there's a cancellation, can I pick it up? And she said, sure, I'll put you on a cancellation list. Like, I think I might even said, the doctor said to mention to you about getting on a cancellation list. He never said any such thing. That was a little fib. I was desperate. I didn't have the mindset that I had now and in my mentality, right? Uh, I needed that plastic surgery. I desperately needed that plastic surgery. Um, I'm just going to take a second here, take a little bit of break for this, have a sip of my coffee, and I'm going to read Tammy's comment here. Mm, good, good coffee. I have an old boss of mine, Cindy, who had that same operation like you did back in 2006. So I saw what he went through too, the whole process. So I know that you went through a very hard road and life. Yeah, it was something, right? I had the tummy tuck. I had the tummy tuck first. I got a cancellation and I got right in there within a couple of weeks. I had that operation, and it was not as bad as the gastric bypass. Actually, it wasn't very bad at all. I was quite excited for it, and it made a huge difference, not just in my body, but I could feel the happiness and the pride in what I was doing. I was quite proud of myself that I'd given myself courage to be determined to get this done. And I hadn't had the boobies fixed yet, right? And it was kind of amazing because I came to life. Like my whole mentality, it was like I was a different person mentally, right? It was, I can't even describe the experience because it was like I can't even describe what it was like. It was like I was a totally different person, right? The boys were appreciating me. It's when I had the courage to go after a job that I really wanted, which was being a waitress in a nightclub. Like I would never have done something like that. I would have like maybe been a waitress in a coffee shop or worked behind in the kitchen, right? But to think that I could work in a nightclub, and I got into that job, and having that job just added to that glory in my whole life, to be able to go to clothing stores and buy beautiful clothes, to be able to uh, date, which I did. I was still shy and introverted, very nervous about it, but I was excited about it too because men were appreciating me for the first time in my entire life. And, when I said I didn't fix the inside, those insecurities that I had about myself in my mind, right? I could see that I was thin, but I had the personality of somebody who had a lot of insecurities, a lot of problems. I didn't resolve any of my issues. I didn't have any confidence in any way, no self worth, right? I was still going to work and killing myself at work and being there every single day. When at that point, I just wanted to be up and off and going to the beach and having fun and going to nightclubs and dancing and dating and, right, being chased for the first time in my entire life. Like I said, I didn't recognize the person that I had become, right? I was super happy. Like I was having so much fun. In that process, I met my husband, and he was in the military, and it was really hard for me, and I didn't want to date a lot of guys because of my insecurities and my inability to say no, right? To say no, and I couldn't say no. It was hard, right? If somebody paid attention to me or gave me a compliment, they had me right away, right? So I didn't want to be that person because I saw, right, in the experience living vicariously through my girlfriends and my sister's relationships with men, I didn't want to be that person. I met my husband, and he called him my one night stand who never went away, in all honesty. He swept me off my feet. He treated me like Cinderella. He was so much like me in that over pleasing, that over giving and not giving enough to himself, right? That we were the perfect match in that span of time that we were in. I never even had the breasts done. Like I said, I was like that little old lady in the Penthouse magazines where boobies were right down to the ankles. And I'm not even joking in that. They were just, right? And he still loved me. Eventually, I did get to have those operations, right? So grateful because once I was able to get that body fixed, right, where it looked like a normal, it changed everything for me. But at the same time, I still had those insecurities. And because my coping mechanism was taken away from me, right? Because I had to stay skinny, didn't I? Right? But you can't give up one bad habit without picking up another habit. Of course, it's got to be a good habit. Lots of people, right? They give up heroin and they go to cocaine, or they go to marijuana, or they go to drinking, right? Or they go to shopping or sex, or but they pick up something. That's why people, when they start their diets on New Year's Eve, they start exercising. It's just not to make the process go faster. It's another addiction to replace the addiction of food. And that's a truth, right? And that's why lots of people, they don't last on their New Year's Eve resolution, because they go on their diets, but they don't pick up another interest or hobby, a healthy addiction, right? They just go cold turkey. And you know what it's like, possibly going cold turkey. When you quit smoking, it's almost impossible, right? I did it for ages and ages. I would go to bed and say, "This is my last cigarette." And then wake up in the morning, and the first thing I do was have a coffee and a cigarette, right? And I did that for years. I haven't had a cigarette in over 20 years, right? But I know that feeling of failing like that. But I did need a coping mechanism. So here we go, right? Cindy and I got introduced to gambling uh, through my winning a big one, right? I was broke. I had no money. I put my last few cents in the slot machine. I hit a big one, and that became my next coping mechanism. Okay, so you guys can kind of feel, right, that when you give up one addiction, you pick up another one. And if you fail in that addiction, now you have two addictions, right? Because now I was a gambler and I was doing payday loans and I was stressing myself out. I had become a fibber with my husband and trying to juggle bills and explain where my money was. And right in that, because I never fixed myself on the inside, I only fixed myself on the outside, right? That I put myself in that state where I started gaining weight again. It took years, right? I'm comfortable at the weight that I am at right now, right? I could do to lose maybe 20 pounds, but I don't think I want to lose any more than 20 pounds. But I've pretty much maintained my weight all these years since 1987 when I first had that operation. But I never fixed the inside. It wasn't until I found mindset that I started picking up lessons and messaging and having understandings as to what I really did to myself. And because I understood that I needed a new addiction. And by this time, I was out on the road, I was urban exploring. I made my YouTube channel my healthy addiction. And that healthy addiction of having my YouTube channel, at that time, I was urban exploring. I was doing outdoor adventures. I wasn't doing mindset. I wasn't exploring emotions. I wasn't delving into my past. I should have done that, right? Far before I ever had that gastric bypass. I would have saved myself decades of pain, right? In doing that. But that's not to say that there weren't joyous moments and ecstatic spans of life that I lived in that time. I just did not resolve my problems, and I picked up new coping mechanisms, new ways to cope, right? In not taking care of myself, taking care of myself emotionally, mentally, right? And physically. And you can right? You can put makeup over a face full of pimples, right? But they're still there, right? They're still there. You take a cloth and some soap and you wash your face. It's still there, right? And that's where I was in my frame of mind. So just to give people the idea, about working on yourself and treating yourself like you matter, right? Like you really do matter. It's been a long process for me, right? Over 10 years of crap that was just passed down from one generation to the next. And we carry this our entire life. And lots of people say, oh, I don't want to look at the past. I don't want to understand it. It's there. It's over. It's done with. It's not over. It's not done with. You're carrying it like a monkey on your back, like those weights and those anchors and that luggage that you drag with you from one relationship to another, or maybe not even to one relationship into another, because you're not capable of having those relationships, right? And that's what I did to myself. And that's why I'm so adamant about doing the work and understanding what I got wrong. Because when I stepped into working in emotions, because I only stepped into working into emotions because I understood your purpose comes from your pain. So if my purpose came from my pain, I had to go into my pain to understand. And when I got a good look, when I got a good feel, when I got a big old wow, I did that to myself, right? And maybe I didn't do it to myself, but in the end, I picked up that baton and I ran with it 100% because we cope. We need ways to cope, right? We all cope in different ways. And because we're brought up to feel guilt and shame, like I said, that was my steering wheel. And so I lived in guilt and shame my entire life, right? My entire life, in being the examples to my sisters, in my marriage falling apart, in being a gambling addict in order to to uh, um, have some kind of happiness in my life. I couldn't be around people because they just made me feel even worse. And because I couldn't say no, I felt resentment in that, right? I hated the free paychecks. And every every job I ever had somebody there, who was making a free paycheck on my back. And, being somebody who prides themselves now in not having that feeling of, right, resentment, right? There's no reason for resentment in any way. And that stuff ate me ate me alive. I didn't even want to work with these people anymore, these environments. And I blamed them. And of course, being, right, highly sensitive and empathic, people see that dot on your forehead and say, oh, yeah, we'll hire this one. This is going to be the workhorse. This is going to be fun, right? She's going to be the bolt for everything. Anything that goes wrong is going to be her fault. And if people don't show up for work, that's okay. It can go on her plate, right? We'll make her a supervisor so it could be her responsibility. And here I am thinking I need to be the supervisor just so people won't be on my back and harping at me and telling me what to do. And that wasn't the case in any way. Oh my goodness, I dug myself such a hole in my life and didn't even recognize it. When I first started, right, understanding your purpose comes from your pain, I said, yeah, I went through that, right? But it's over with. I'm fine. I'm totally fine. I got my life under control. I didn't have my life under control, right? I was a gambling addict. I was a payday loan addict. I was divorced. I couldn't hold a job. I was miserable, sad, hypervigilant, right? And that stuff only got resolved, sorry. That only got resolved because I made it a point of making sure that I mattered emotionally, mentally, and physically. And it was hard work and it was painful. And I, in the beginning, could only do it in baby steps. That's all I could digest because it was just too, I was getting smacked right and left with realizations. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? That's what happened. That's what happened. And then resolve that and feel good about that. The next thing you know, I'm delving into something else. And it took years and years to overcome and actually recognize that I matter. I have something to contribute. And, I don't have to use that word despite, because at that time, despite what anybody thought, I was going to create the best life for myself as I possibly could. But I was like a 300-pound miserable woman, right? And I have to take responsibility for being a gambling addict, right? For being addicted to payday loans, for being 311 pounds, for my marriage falling apart, for not being able to hold on to jobs. I did. I can't just say that because in those stages, in those seasons of finding myself and being happy, right? That was the whole point, is to see in when I was working on myself in losing that weight and being determined to have those operations and, creating this new life for myself. I actually came alive, but I didn't come alive permanently because that miserableness snuck back in through all those cracks that I didn't recognize that I had because, I was looking good. I had a nice looking husband who made lots of money. Had a great job. I was loving life. I had beautiful clothes, right? But my mentality, it was still broken. It was still broken. And the way that I coped, well, I went into the gambling and destroyed my marriage. And when I destroyed my marriage, that put me in a state, didn't it? Right? And it was only through, you know, crying, talking, and time that I came out of that one. And I found that peace in being out on the road, right? By myself, giving myself that space to contemplate. And in contemplating, right, start thinking about things. And in understanding your purpose comes from your pain, you start putting yourself in your own shoes, in your past life, and you recognize that all these wrenches that you threw into your life, that I threw into my life, right? That didn't need to be, because it was just all in coping with the problems that I had, right? The problems that I had. I fixed the outside, but I didn't fix the inside. So, in that conversation, I wanted to say I kept my word today, and I got myself a family doctor. I got a really nice lady. She spent some time with me. She has given me a 2 sheets of different blood tests and different things that I've got to get done. And I'm going to follow her instruction in that process, because that's part of taking care of myself, right? So the whole idea is to be the evidence for others, right? The evidence that, you know, we are responsible for our own well being. I am 64 years old, right? And I feel good. That doesn't mean, right? That's just an outside thing. What about the inside? I'd like to really know what's going on with the inside, because if there's something going on in the inside, I'm not going to get addicted into being that homophobic, because right, you can get addicted to that too, in being worried about your health and letting doctors prescribe you drugs because they got friends who work in pharmacies and they're working hand in hand. So, I specifically had a conversation with this lovely lady, and she just like my last family doctor, who really, say, Cindy, go for a walk. Cindy, meditate. So I trust that, if I have to go on the blood pressure pills, I'm going to go on the blood pressure pills, right? Because I believe in innovation. I believe that things are constantly getting better, and I have to trust in the system, because I haven't done a very good job in trusting me. And because I have this platform, right? Because it's important for me to express and be that example for others, that, I can treat myself like I matter. I can care for myself like a parent, right? We have to do that self parenting, right? I don't want to be lecturing. I want to just tell the story, be done with it. Right? And I'm not necessarily going to say that, because if I have to come back in in that expression of my story, I will, because it is an example to others as how low people can get. But because we wear these masks, right? Because we represent ourselves as something that we're not, that life is good, we are perfect, right? That everything's good on the outside, so everything's going to be good on the inside, that everybody can have a good recognition, right? That Cindy is going to be genuine in this, and I'm going to do what I have to do to hit that goal of mine of living to be 114 years old. Whether I hit it or not, I don't know, but I'm going to be happy in the pursuit of it, right? I'm going to enjoy the landscapes of my life. I'm going to be that example to others that I can take care of myself. And right, we could say, I'll take care of myself. I'm all tough, right? But to be able to ask for that help and to search out the smarty pants out there, right? And I'm so grateful for the smarty pantses who have come across my path. Yeah, because I might have been that person because I don't have those aches and pains and bleeding noses and headaches. I've never had a headache, not one in my entire life. That doesn't mean that there's not something else that's going on in my system, right? I'm not going to say that I'm excited for this, right? It makes me a little bit nervous, right? Here in Manitoba, before you can get your car insured, you have to go to a mechanic and your car has to go through an examination. They call it a safety check, and it has to check off all these things. Otherwise, you can't insure your car. She's given me 2 sheets of blood tests and things she wants to test for and stuff, right? So it makes me nervous what's going to come back when I have those tests done. But just because I'm nervous about it, right? I'm still going to do it, even understanding that something on that list is not going to get a check. It's going to get an X to say, oh, pay attention to this one. This one doesn't pass. This is an issue. This is something that she hasn't recognized in her life because she has that mentality, right? That everything is going to be okay. I'm grateful for my good health, right? But how do I know that my health is good, right? Because I feel well. Lots of times people have things going on in their systems and they feel perfectly fine, and then all of a sudden they get smacked in their face with something. There is that possibility. But whatever shows up, if anything shows up, I suspect it's time for me to go on some blood pressure pills, right? I suspect that. I've been paying attention to my blood pressure, and I understand I'm getting mature now. I can't expect that my good health is going to last forever, but I can have an understanding and a handle on it and not have those what ifs or worries or anything. Let's just get it all done and see from there if anything is up, right? And so we're just going to go through the process. Whatever shows up, shows up. And if nothing shows up, then I'm going to be proud no matter what, right? Because it's important for me to take care of all aspects of myself because nobody's going to do it for me. I could have just as easily have not done it, right? And just carried on until something really does trip me up and I've left it for too long, right? I didn't go to the doctor for any other reason then it's time, Cindy, to get a new family doctor instead of just going to walking clinics when you're not feeling good. Go to a walking clinic. Get yourself a doctor who can oversee your well being and give you the heads up when something isn't going well. And she recognized, she says, yes, Cindy, right? Your blood pressure is high. If you've been checking on it, we're going to give it a couple of weeks and see how it goes. But, most people at my age are on blood pressure pills or on recommendations to control their blood pressure and stuff. And that might be a possibility too. But she's checking everything else in the meantime. We're talking everything. Oh my goodness. Right? But you know what? That shows that she's a good doctor, that she's starting at the point where she should be starting, where she has a good recognition of where I'm at so that she can pay attention as we go. Okay, let me come into the comments here. Um, do. Hello, Eugene. I saw you there, dear. Um, Tabby says, yes, I know that type of surgery is a must to stay a certain weight, and that type of surgery makes a stomach so small too. And so a person can't eat much and a person can get full fast. Yeah, but the stomach stretches too. I had mine in 1987. I can eat Christmas dinner like everybody else now, right? But, uh, I am a lot more energetic when I than when I was bigger. I wasn't moving in any way. So burning helps to maintain the weight. And my vitamins and my minerals. I'm pretty good with my vitamins and minerals and making sure that I'm covering my nutritional needs, right? And not to mention my emotional and mental needs that I've taken care of and am taking care of these these parts of me, right? It's part of that self-parenting. It's part of making sure that Cindy knows that, right, she's being taken care of because nobody's going to do it for me. Everybody's in the busy and problems of their own lives, and that's just the truth, right? And it's my responsibility to, if I want to live to be 115 years, 114 years old, right? That I take responsibility for myself, and I understand that, my joy and my happiness will surface and skyrocket because I am taking care of myself. Even if something is not right, at least I know the things that I have to do in order to get things back on track. If that possibility is there, I don't know. I just like I said, I'm a little bit nervous with these sheets of paper she gave to me. I'm going to get it done. I would like to see what's under the hood, right? To make sure that everything is going good. And I'm going to be honest in the process, and I'm going to be on it. And being on it and not in a hypochondriac way, that will give me something else in my interest to focus on. And, we should be focusing on our well being, right? We should be focusing on our well being. And that's a very bad trait that highly sensitives, INFJs, codependents, right? Empaths, right? We have a lack in taking care of ourselves because we are more concerned with taking care of everybody else, right? Sometimes because of our good health, or our good hearts, sometimes because of our hypervigilance, sometimes because of what people will think of us, right? Sometimes it's in our own mentality, like that guilt and shame, right? But for whatever the reason is, it doesn't really matter, does it? Because in the end, right, we've got to make those choices for ourselves. So, when I said last night we are going to talk about that operation I had, that's what I wanted to talk about. I don't think, I've never gone into that depth before, but I think, in in showing the person that I was, that people might get a better idea of how much work, right, that I put into it. But I didn't kill myself in that process. I did it in baby steps, in small, digestible bites, right? And it served me. It served me very well because, I've had enough yanks in my life. I've had enough 360-degree turns and 180-degree turns. I would much rather make those small adjustments myself than be smacked in the face, right? And put myself in a state where I end up with another coping mechanisms, right? Okay, you guys, let's just see what else is going on here. Um, we are so alike, Cindy, in so many ways. I feel like we are twins in some way. Ah, ah, right. And I hope you take care of yourself too, Tammy. Right? Too. It's important to treat yourself, but for myself, I still haven't got the handle. I still like the treats, right? I still picked up a bag of potato chips for the walk home. I went for a nice long walk along the river, right? And I went into another part of the city. And, but on the way home, I picked up a bag of chips and I ate a bag of chips on the way home, right? So I still don't have a handle on that. I could have picked up an apple or an orange, but I don't have that mentality yet. It doesn't mean that it'll never happen. And it'll be in my own choices, right? It will be in my own choices. But I'm grateful for the steps that I take in the moment. And I recognize that, that sense of taking care of myself is in place now. And it, there was a time in my life that it just wasn't there. And it makes you wonder and it makes you appreciate that you can relate to other people, who are in that same freight in a different way, maybe with drugs or alcohol, right? Or whatever coping mechanisms they have. But, to have somebody to be honest in that and, it makes you appreciate yourself, that you're not in it all by yourself, that this is something that singularly to you, we all struggle in it. It's just most of us, we just wear masks to let people think that we're okay, right? And it's up to us if you want to truly be okay to take those steps yourself, to make those choices and to put that action into it, right? Do that work because that work does work. And I am the example. I am the evidence that it does. And that's the truth. And that's why I show up here every single day, right? In my healthy addiction, my accountability to myself to be here. And it helps me to overcome those insecurities that I've had and I've carried my entire life. You guys know, it took me over a year just to be able to come in front of a camera. It took me decades to show myself in public, and here I am again in front of the camera, right? There was a time I wouldn't even leave the house to the corner store for a quart of milk without slathering on the makeup. And now I don't wear makeup at all, right? It's pretty incredible, right? And when I say that, you guys can see the pride and joy in my life that I've gotten myself into a state where I'm capable of doing that. That says something about where I am in this moment because that wasn't me 10 years ago. Well, we'll say 15 years ago. It has been a process, but I do things in baby steps. And that's just another example for others, right? That if it seems just like too impossible for you, right? Baby steps just might be the thing that you need. right? Everybody thinks they need it yesterday. And sometimes those opportunities do happen. Just like I told that receptionist to put me on a waiting list for that operation, and I got in 2 weeks. Those bonuses in life, right, do come, but you have to put that work into it, right? Right? And then if you put in that action, if you get that movement going, something or someone will come up behind you and help you along because they can see that you're making that effort, right? Because if you're just so immersed in those coping mechanisms, right, people would be afraid to come in and give you a hand in that, right? Because that might affect their own movement that they're trying to make for their own lives. And we hold resentment in that because you, why won't you help me? You're my mother. You, why won't you help me? You're my sister. Why won't you help me? You're my husband. You're my best friend, right? And we expect people to keep company with us in that misery, right? Because we feel so lost and alone and so devastated where we're at in the moment. We don't recognize that somebody else might just be holding themselves afloat by, right, keeping that negative out of their own lives, right? And then we hold resentment in that. In the end, we have to be our own caregivers, right? We have to be our own caregivers. And that's the truth, right? And some of us need to be our own caregivers, right? Some of us have that privilege of having caregivers, right? Some of us are comfortable in other people directing our lives, but some of us, right, haven't had any space to have that freedom or that opportunity to do that for ourselves. Okay, let's come into these last couple of comments. We'll pull a card. Ah, Cindy, I'm very, very happy for you that you found a primary physician and a personal doctor. Yeah, I'm pretty impressed. And she was really, really lovely. And she took her time with me. And it was just an introductory today. But she kind of did small examinations and everything. And, there was the concern that yes, my blood pressure was a little bit higher than it should be. But in other ones, she goes, "Oh, good. Oh, good." And that kind of made me feel happy in that. But in the blood test, that might show something different. But that's the waiting game, isn't it? And it's in that waiting game that you treat yourself well. You treat yourself with kindness. It's not like you give yourself the potato chips and stuff like that, but you find healthy interests, healthy hobbies, right? Healthy coping mechanisms to get you through that process. And if something should happen and I should read something that I'm not happy to see and find myself in that situation, then I will take care of it, right? It's not going to change the person that I am. We all have problems emotionally, mentally, physically. And that's the truth for each and every single one of us. We all have challenges. But that's not going to take away from me creating the best life for myself as I possibly can. Okay. I am guilty in many ways. My life growing up and how my parents were, and even then, others were first and me last. Right. And then as an adult, my kids and others were always first and me last, and caregiving and everyone first, right? But it's you first, Tabby. It's always you first. You give from the froth flowing over the mug. You can't give from an empty, right? And lots of people expect that. And when you've done that entire life and you try and take that away from others, they go, "Oh, you're being so selfish. What have I done?" And right? And it's only in recognizing, right? This is your life, right? You get one shot at it. Cindy's not coming back. Other parts of me are, but Cindy is not coming back, right? And I want to enjoy this experience, right? For as long as I can. And that's my responsibility to make sure that physically, emotionally, and mentally that I can do that, right? Each one of us has got to be the example for the next, right? And you would want your kids to feel that way about themselves, right? That if you're the caregiver for everybody, then they might grow up to be a caregiver too and sacrifice themselves, right? Like we sacrificed ourselves. That's exactly what we did. We sacrificed ourselves for others. And, you know, when those lifelines are coming down, when people are desperate, they'll take it. I've been in that situation where I've been so desperate. And anything that was offered, I would grab onto that, right? And those are the lifelines, those are the caregivers. That's us, right? We just have to make sure that we find joy for ourselves, right? No matter what's going on in our lives, that we're finding joy for ourselves. We're creating the best life for ourselves as we possibly can. But in doing that, we can be the examples for others. We can be the evidence for others that it can be done, right? And it's a challenge. It is a challenge, isn't it? Okay. But yeah, beautiful, Tammy. Thank you for sharing that. Right. And you know, in sharing these things, people can appreciate where you're at. And sometimes in that recognition, we see these aspects of ourselves and maybe give ourselves a little tester, right? It's like um, Earl Nightingale, you know, a 30-day test in doing all these aspects for yourself to see exactly where you're at in your own life to create the best life for yourself as you possibly can. I did that test, right? 30 days, and it was, I think, the very first thing that I did when I woke up to some of these ideas, and it really showed me where I was at in my life. And it made a big difference. Just those 30 days, right? Just those 30 days. Look it up. Earl Nightingale, 30 day test. Yeah, it should come up on Google right away. And, you know, it's old school, but you know, some of the best lessons are the oldest lessons in time. Yeah, 100%. Uh, but I have to take care of myself too. I'm happy knowing that my kids do take care of themselves. Thank God I did make sure of that, right? Independence. That's absolutely, absolutely amazing. And you're the example. Like, there's nothing wrong. I love taking care of others. I love doing for others because it it does something for me. You know, it's in the programming. That's where we get our self-worth. That's what makes us feel good. But you can't do it from an empty cup. You can't do it when you're broken and when you're suffering and when you're sacrificing yourself. Okay, you guys, I'm done with that. I'm done with that. But it is important. I hope it's important. I hope somebody gets something out of that. You know, I hope somebody does. You know, it's hard sometimes. This is personal stuff that we talk about, but I have to be the example for others, right? And I believe in the end, it is a good lesson, right? And I'll come back into it and I go, oh, Cindy. But I'll come out of it no worse for wear. Just like after all those blood tests and everything that I get, oh, right? I'm not even gonna, I'm not gonna say I'm not gonna give it a thought, but I'm gonna get it over and done with as fast as I can. That's the idea. You don't want to hold on to these things and postpone them and procrastinate because it just wears you down, right? It just breaks you down. And what you think about is realized. And because we have such great imaginations, right? We can think things into being. Yeah. And I want to just get it over and done with. I think maybe Friday I will go get this done. It's going to be a rainy day tomorrow, so I don't want to go and get my blood tests. I have to walk. There's no good bus service out there, but yeah, I'll get it done maybe Friday. That was good. I said I was going to do it today. I did it today, right? And it was no pain at all. And I was so pleased in the end. She was such a lovely, caring, right? Just the kind of doctor that I want to be seeing, right? Okay, you guys, here's the word. It is pertinent to the conversation. It does sometimes work out that way, right? Kindness is a gift that serves all parties. Thumbnail, right? In that kindness to ourselves, right? That kindness to ourselves, making sure that we are showing ourselves that we matter, right? That we're not taking those hits for others when we are broken in whatever aspect that we're broken in, whether it's emotionally, mentally, physically, right? That kindness is just not to go to others. That kindness should be directed at ourselves. Me dragging my butt to go get myself a new family doctor, right? That was a kindness to myself. That truly was a kindness. And it made for good topic of conversation tonight, didn't it? It made for a good topic of conversation tonight because it's important to be that example. And, if it serves one person, right? Today, tomorrow, next year, 10 years, or, right? 10 lifetimes from now when I am gone, right? That somebody go, oh, right? that that serves, and that would be a kindness for me also because, well, my self-worth comes from doing those kindnesses for others. And sometimes in doing those kindnesses for ourselves, that's the example, that's the evidence that somebody else might pick up on, right, for themselves. And that would make me feel really, really good, right? If you got anything out of this, let me know in the content or comments down below. I would appreciate it. That would be absolutely amazing, And if you want to try that 30-day test by Earl Nightingale, it's pretty amazing. It served me very, very well. Um, if you've been putting off going to see a doctor, going for a little checkup, I'm encouraging you to get it done, right? We all have to do things that we don't want to do, but there is that sense of accomplishment when we can get our butts in gear and get it done, right? And that starts with being kind to ourselves. It's a gift that serves all parties in being the example that it can be done. Okay, you guys, that's gonna have to be my good cheer. Time to have a sip of my fresh cold coffee. You guys, Have a great night. I will be back tomorrow. And yeah, thank you, Tammy, again. I appreciate your company. Have a great night. Oh, and Eugene, too. Shout out to Eugene. Have a great night.